if you're going to go 30 years in this racket, the one thing that you have to learn to do is be adaptable.
Hello and welcome to Where the Living Room Used to Be, a podcast about Rhode Island's music scene. Hey everyone, it's James. John Difruscio has been a nightclub and concert promoter in Providence since the early 80s. Starting as a radio DJ at Rhode Island College, he's gone on to book shows at the Living Room and Confetti. He's also run venues such as Club Hell and Firehouse 13. In our interview, we talk about a lot of this stuff and the ups and downs of the music business from his experience. And we also discuss what he has planned in the future for Askew and Alchemy, which are two of the clubs that he co-owns with his wife, Windsong Hadley. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening right now. And also make sure to follow Where the Living Room Used to Be on Facebook and Instagram. I'll be posting a bunch of photos of show flyers and a whole bunch more from John's time in music. Thanks.
East Providence had a lot of woods. I mean, this was the 70s.
Yeah.
So, there was still a lot of underdeveloped land. And, it wasn't, it was just a typical, working class, middle class, neighborhood, really.
Okay.
The one interesting thing, I could say that when I was in high school, I was probably 16, somewhere in there, 15, somewhere between 15 and 17. There was a venue that decided to make a go of it. It was called Center Stage.
Okay.
And it was actually in East Providence. And, I think the players that were involved were people that were, in the music scene at that time. And this is before my time. So I'm not really familiar with who everybody was. But I remember I used to have to walk back and forth by it to get to work. I had an after-school job. Mm-hmm. And so this place existed on the same road as the high school and in between my job and school. And so I used to walk by it sometimes at night at the end of my shift, and I would hear, music coming out of this thing. And I remember that for me anyway, that was kind of like the first feeling that I got, that I really couldn't explain. I just always remembered that I would walk by this place and I would stop, and listen to the music a little bit and get a little excited about it and, and wonder what's going on inside, mm-hmm. And, having no idea that, that kind of thing was in me. But whatever it was kind of drawing me to it. And what I actually found out years later was I spent some time listening through the wall at a band playing, and it turned out that it was U2 on their first American tour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was, probably, but way before I think most people didn't know who they were, whatever record they were on, maybe Boy or War, and yeah. I don't recall seeing a lot of cars in the lot or anything like that. So I imagine it probably wasn't a great show for the venue, but U2 did play East Providence, Rhode Island.
Wow. Yeah. I did not know that. All right. Is that the typical band that would play there? Was it like rock bands that were playing?
Yeah. I mean, for me, most of the time when I was walking by, it would be rock bands of some kind. And,
okay.
And again, I had yet to really head into that path, so I didn't really know a ton about music at that time. Most of the music I knew was whatever my dad was playing.
Okay. And what was he into? Is it?
Well, my dad was a singer, and he had got involved with the choir in high school, and then got involved with a and this is the 60s now, early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, and he ended up taking three guys from the choir and formed this little 4-piece singing group. It was mostly an a cappella singing group, kind of almost like a doo-wop thing, I guess. And, and he actually, spent a little time, going out and playing a few shows here or there and singing some songs in a few places. And they got on a television show. I forgot which one it was. It wasn't Ed Sullivan or anything like that, but it was something. I think it was like a local version of like the Ed Sullivan show. And so he got to sing on TV, and cool. So he was like into all that kind of stuff. He loved. Some of the bands that I took, some of the music that I took away from him, really, the Drifters were one of them. Love them, love that music, and that stuff I just, remember my dad playing all the time.
Yeah.
You had to be a really good singer. My dad was a good singer.
Yeah, okay.
And it was really important to him that, singers sang,
Yeah.
By the time I got around to start listening to my contemporaries, he was like, what the hell is this crap? Just didn't want to hear it,
Yeah.
So, then I got to high school and I sort of started going, hey, there's this rock and roll thing going on.
Yeah.
So started kind of listening to what my friends were listening to,
Yeah. Yeah. And when did you start going to shows? And where were you going?
Again, I think, two things were going on. One, I was a jock. So I had a really important wrestling career going on at the time. And, and my parents were a little bit, strict. So I didn't get, I wasn't the kind of kid that was like, out of the house at 15 going to shows.
Okay.
I didn't get that opportunity. Believe it or not, the first live band I ever saw on a stage was Quiet Riot. And they were also on stage with them with the local band, The Neighborhoods.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it was a weird show. The lineup, even at that, I'm standing at my first show and I'm going, man, this lineup doesn't make any sense. I already had an ear for it, back then. But that show, it was actually at Fox Point. It was outside, and it became a famous show for a while because during the show, a kid ended up climbing all the way up to the top of the electric wire, the high tension wire tower, and jumped off and killed himself. In the middle of the show, the band had to stop playing. The whole show almost got canceled. It was pretty, it was like big news, for 1982 or 83, whenever that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was my first experience with live rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was that. And then my first show at the Civic Center was, I believe, was Twisted Sister with Quiet Riot opening up for them, or the other way around. It was one of the two, but I ended up, and that was months later, and that was my first Civic Center show.
Yeah.
And then somebody, back then you used to have to wait out for your tickets, right? So if you wanted a good seat, you like went overnight and sat out in front of the Civic Center and waited for the
tickets to go on sale at the box office.
Go on sale. Maybe they gave you a number. Sometimes there would be security there. They'd give you a number so you knew how to line up at the time. And so the greatest thing about that was that you get to meet these kids from everywhere. And
that were just into the same kind of music. And
everybody brought music, because they had nothing better to do for 6 or 7 hours but sit outside. And, we didn't have, obviously we didn't have the internet. We didn't have, all the things that the kids have today. So having that kind of experience really, was the only way music sort of got passed from hand to hand. And it's how you got exposed to stuff. And so, I just happened to be sitting next to this guy, who was playing this really crazy heavy metal music I never heard of in my life. And that was my, sitting out in front of the Civic Center was kind of like my first exposure to, that whole underground thing that, And so leading up to the Living Room, the first show I ever saw at the Living Room was a band called Merciful Fate. Which was like a European black metal band. Nobody in the United States was doing anything like that. And it was, and you couldn't get the music. I happened to, this kid happened just have a tape of it, and he, played it for me, and I was like, wow, that's cool. And then, that was it. After that, I was hooked. You fast forward a couple of months, and I'm back at the Civic Center. I run into the same kid, and I was like, hey, how the hell do you get all this stuff?
Oh, okay.
Where do you get these cassettes? We were listening to cassettes, right? It's like, where do you get them? You can't walk into Strawberries and buy that.
Some like European black. Yeah.
You're not going to get any of that, right? So he tells me about Sam's Records, Tapes, and Stuff. You ever hear of Sam's?
Yeah. Yep.
So Sam's Records, Tapes, and Stuff. It was, this little tiny place out in the middle of, Cranston, Warwick. And it was the only place that sold the stuff. Only place.
Wow.
And I walked in there, and then, that whole entire thing just opened up from there. It was like, being a kid in a candy shop, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
And I bought Metallica there, Kill 'Em All, original copy of Kill 'Em All. And that was it. That was the album.
Yeah.
I listened to that album, and I said, wow, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but it has to have something to do with this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was that next step? Like when, it seems like you've been booking shows forever now. What was that first step into doing that? Or do you remember the first show you booked?
Yeah. Well, what happened was, and this is where wrestling comes into play again. I actually, by this time now, I was at Rhode Island College wrestling there. Mm-hmm. And one of my teammates was also at the radio station. He was into music as well. And so he suggested that I go to the radio station and maybe, work up there and, become a DJ. And and so, I went and checked that out. And it just so happened that Dr. Metal was there at that time before he got his job at HJY.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't there maybe a month. And then all of a sudden, the doc gets this call, and he's going to go become a big DJ at HJY, and somebody needed to take over the heavy metal department at the college radio station.
Yeah.
And that was me. And then the first thing I learned about college radio is that, it was important to record labels that college radio was around, because we were playing stuff that the HJYs of the world wouldn't play.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I suddenly realized really quickly that, I was kind of valuable to these guys, right?
Yeah.
And, so I started asking for things. And one of the first things I thought of doing was interviewing the bands.
Oh, okay.
And so
like having them come into the studio, like when they're on tour, whatever.
Or better yet, getting free tickets to the show and going to interview them, on the tour bus, backstage, whatever, and so that was kind of that was the next step. I started kind of getting in with all the bands and interviewing them, and I started learning a lot about. Now I'm at the living room all the time by this point, almost every night sometimes, and I just started kind of learning about the inner workings of what actually happens at a show, and how it all kind of falls into place, and I just knew that I was getting more and more addicted to it, and I was subsequently working on networking through all the record labels too. So I thought I was going to go to New York City and start working at record labels and working my way up. And that certainly was on the table at that time too. But I ended up, because I was, I think you noticed already. I've also had a career as a nightclub promoter, and an owner. Club Hell was a nightclub first, before it was a live band venue, and so I had already kind of started doing these college dance party kind of things that were going pretty well, and we were doing those at the living room as well. So I was actually making pretty good money for 1988, 87.
Being a promoter.
Just doing these college parties. And so I, after I found out what my first salary was going to be to run Metal Blade Records on the East Coast, I decided to stay in Providence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was like, okay, I could go to New York City and really struggle, So I was essentially my first business with Randy at the Living Room was actually doing these college parties.
Okay. And how did that work? How was it working with Randy, and like what was the...
Well, Randy loved it because, we were bringing in 500 college kids once every 6 weeks, that would, drink the bar like crazy. And, so he really liked us and really liked what we were doing for him. And, and it really got my foot in the door there, that's, where it started to kind of become family for me.
Okay.
And then accidentally, see, the thing about the Living Room back then was you had the Living Room, you had Lupo's, you might have had another place, a couple of small players around town, but you didn't have a lot of venues to go to. Yeah. So it was hard for bands to get in there to play, and it was hard. It was hard. The Living Room didn't need, a college kid named Psycho to go in there and book shows for them. They already had, everything, really, they already had everything pretty much on lockdown. So, the idea of actually booking a show probably didn't cross my mind at all at the beginning. I was just, maybe making suggestions when I could. Randy was really good at picking your brain.
Oh, okay.
He was like really good at
finding out like what's the new bands like.
Yeah, he was really good. He really paid it. One thing that I got from him over the years that I've always held on to was he realized how important the youth was. Mm-hmm. He realized that it's the young kids that drive the market, and and really kind of decide who the bands are and who they're not. And so he no matter, it didn't matter to him that you might have been a 17-year-old high school kid or a 18-year-old college freshman. If you had something good to say about a band, he would listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and that's what happened. I was really, really good friends with a band called Man of War.
Okay.
Who were doing pretty well. And so Man of War comes to Lupo's, and so naturally I go because I'm going to interview the band, right? And I'm going to, hang out. And, so I'm on the tour bus with them after the show, and I'm like, guys, what, why are you playing Lupo's, man? None of the metal shows go to Lupo's. You got to, they were a little disappointed about the numbers, and partially because nobody knew the show was there.
Oh, okay. Again,
it was a time when, it wasn't like you could just text everybody, hey, the show's at this weird place, So what ended up happening was,
and this is when the Living Room was down, like the bubble living room, right?
So the bubble window living room was happening, and Lupo's was still where Lupo's was originally, at the top of Westminster. Yep. And so, on the bus, I said to the guys, I was like, man, you guys got to play the Living Room. Then, that'll be a packed show,
Yeah.
And they were like, well, but, Psycho, we can't get into the Living Room. We've tried and tried. Randy won't give us a date. So I said, what do you, why don't you guys give me a shot, see if I can get you into the Living Room? I bet you I can. So, we exchanged information, and I went to go see Randy. I was like, Randy, you got to book this band, And he was like, really? You think it's going to be a good show? I'm like, yeah, I'm telling you, you put the show in the room, I'll promote it for free. And if it doesn't sell out, I'll be shocked.
Yeah.
So Randy did. Randy, called him up. Back then you could call a band at home and the mother would answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, hey, answer the phone. It's Psycho.
I love that. Yeah.
And, and so the next thing Man of War plays the Living Room, sells the place out. And Randy comes and finds me at the end of the night and actually gives me a couple of dollars. He's thrilled. He's on, top of the world. Randy was a big personality. And when he was happy, I mean, it was just, you could just, the whole room was, lit up,
Yeah.
So, you could tell. And so he comes and finds me at the end of the night and, all this stuff. And, kid, any suggestions you have? And I don't know what made me do it, to be honest with you. I just, without missing a beat, I just said, well, why don't you just let me book some shows? And he took a step back for a second. And he's, and his response was typical. He was like, kid, he goes, nobody books the Living Room. We do that ourselves.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I hear you, Randy. I go, but, I'm already doing your college parties for you. And, here's a show. And, I'm just asking. I go, it's okay if I can't,
Mm-hmm.
And then about a week later, 2 weeks later, he called me up and he says, okay, here's the rules. You can't book anything we're already going to book. You can only come here and come to the office, look on the calendar. And if there's a Monday open or a Tuesday open, you can fill that.
Yeah.
And that's literally how I got my start.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Some of it was just dumb luck, I guess, really. It was just having the passion to want to do it and
yeah,
in the right place at the right time and getting really lucky. I mean, Randy, God rest his soul to this day. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for him. I really, truly believe that. Yeah, so what happened was, the nightclub stuff started to really take off, and we got this bright idea, me and my partner, that okay, maybe we should bring it to a legitimate dance club and see if it, see how that works,
Okay.
And so we initially ended up at Confetti because we brought the aspect of that Thursday night college dance party over there,
Mm-hmm.
and sure enough, it ended up. That owner was the guy that he wasn't good for much, but there was some things that he taught me along the way. And one of the things that he did for us is he talked us into doing it every week.
Okay.
Which for us at the time was preposterous. It was like, what are you, crazy? We need like 5 weeks to promote this thing. It's a show. Like, we promoted them like shows, it was like a college it was like a college keg party, really. Except that we just did it indoors. So at first we were very resistant to it, but he convinced us that, if you put 500 people in a room long enough, other people are going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And he was right. That we learned a valuable lesson about how nightclubs work and, how, people get people, and it's really the only intangible is that you just you need to create the illusion that that's the place that people want to go.
Yeah.
When people go. So, that's kind of what ended up happening there. We ended up moving the college dance party stuff over to Confetti under the idea that we would still do one every now and then at the living room. That was part of the deal that we made with the Confetti guy. And then the living room closed.
Yeah.
So the living room closed around 1990. And and then by this time now, we were at least 2 years in, 2.5 years in at Confetti, doing every night, every week.
Yep.
So we were in pretty, tight over there at that point. And he didn't have anything going on a Sunday. And, and I didn't have a place to do shows now.
Mm-hmm.
So, we just came up with this bright idea that once a week, we would take these stages and set them up in the middle of the dance floor and have shows,
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there was just nothing going on. Again, it's something that worked then, because, there was nothing going on and kids were starving for it. So,
yeah.
We started telling people we're doing, shows at, Confetti, and people started coming.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was pretty
It
wild.
seems like you had some, some great names that came through there and stuff. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I didn't do anything too giant over there, but it's still, there's still some shows I did there that even I don't remember. That some people come up to me sometimes and go, "I remember when that band played," and it's like,
yeah,
I forgot I did that.
Yeah. There's something from like Drop Dead playing there. Just names that you might not put together with like.
It was actually, it's interesting because I think what happened at Confetti too. Was I think I had a little more freedom to do to put more local stuff on stage. The living room essentially had a national act on stage almost virtually every night.
Yeah.
And and if you were a local band that actually got your own show, you really had to put people in the room. in order for that to happen, and I'm talking about the bubble window, living room. I think, that kind of changed a little bit once the third one opened.
Yeah.
But the, coming out of the late 80s into the early 90s, I think, if anything, the local bands didn't quite have enough stages to play on.
I gotcha. Yeah.
And so, Confetti kind of sort of became that, because obviously I wasn't looking for nationals, every single Sunday.
Yeah.
And so we started just putting these really cool local shows together. So bands like Drop Dead, there was a band called Freak Show.
Oh, yeah.
I booked their first show when they were kids. I mean, they're still great friends with me today. And they, showed up, a bunch of 16-year-old kids showed up and just absolutely packed the room,
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so a lot of those local bands sort of, that's kind of where, almost like kind of where the local scene sort of started to take off a little. And then subsequently, Babyhead was kind of starting to come around.
Yeah.
And they too were, especially because they were a little bit more punk and hardcore oriented, less metal, more punk and hardcore. And, and that scene had a lot, facilitated opportunities for locals to play.
Yeah.
So I think that's where you kind of started to see, probably somewhere around 90, somewhere between 90 and 94, you really started to see the value of local bands getting on stage all the time and playing.
Yeah.
And, that's, kind of to me where it kind of took off,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how long were you doing shows at Confetti, and what was your next step after that?
I mean, that only lasted a few years. We ended up having a falling out with that guy. We had to get out of there.
Oh, okay.
And, so we ended up at Shooters, doing our dance night stuff there. That's when our nightclub stuff really took off. We just got huge at Shooters, because we could put, 1,500 people in the room.
Wow. Okay.
So, that really started to take off, and there was, probably, I would say there was probably a good year or two where I wasn't booking anything. I mean, Babyhead was already up and running. They had their own guys.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I wanted to walk in there and, go, hey, give me a show. It just at the time, it wasn't right. I was enjoying going there, and I was happy that, people were happy to see me, and, I could go there and see a show, and there was, we all know, how many shows, tremendous shows happen to go that way too. I mean, Babyhead had that moment in time where they were the only place doing shows. So, if you wanted to play Rhode Island, that's where you played. And I mean, that, they had some months of shows. Every once in a while, you see those calendars still pop up on Facebook or whatever. And you're just, you're just like, how the hell, holy shit,
the calendars from the new paper or whatever, whoever
to have
every day after day. It was like,
and then the second Lupo's opened somewhere around 94.
Mm-hmm.
And, so then, that's kind of where we met Rich, and, we moved our dance party over there, and, next thing I know, I had a place to, maybe do a show or two.
Okay. And is this all been under the Intrinsic name?
No, I didn't come up with Intrinsic until, me and my college buddy we called our dance party Lounge Lizard Presents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we were Lounge Lizard Presents for the longest time.
Yeah.
And, and then, and again, I right around that time, I would say, from 92 to, through the mid 2000s, that was the longest gap of time I took away from live music. I probably didn't book a show for well over 10 years.
Oh, okay.
I was still going to shows. I was still, at least, in the scene a little bit, being at Lupo's all the time and working there. But I just didn't book anything, and I sort of, I missed it. I didn't realize how much. I mean, I opened up Club Hell, and Club Hell was so big. I just spent that time, I decided to spend that time, being a nightclub promoter and a nightclub owner.
Yeah. What brought you back to that? I mean, that seems like a pretty big thing from going from, a bunch of time not booking shows to I'm going to go own a club,
Yeah. Well, so what happened was, ironically, and I say this because of where I am now, the Century Lounge closed.
Yeah.
So the Century Lounge closed, and Jack Rich, who was booking all the shows for Lupo at the time, was in a panic because he needed a place to do. He needed a small room to
that
move
scale,
some of these shows to that he already had booked on the table. So his intention was to just find a spot in an emergency to try to get some shows done. And again, I just seized that opportunity, and my partners weren't huge fans of live music, and for the longest time they just didn't want to have it in Club Hell, and it was probably the right decision because Hell was doing great without it. Mm-hmm. But that was just that perfect time again where some of our dance nights were starting to fall off, the place was starting to look a little shabby. I got this guy Jack Rich now that's desperate to put shows in a room somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I convinced everybody that maybe Club Hell should be at least part-time, should be a live band venue.
Yeah.
And we struck a deal, and then next thing Hell started doing shows.
Yeah. Okay.
So and that was my, I guess my second or third moment of levity. I think I had realized I had missed it. Didn't realize how much I missed it till I stood in my room and watched the band play for the first time. And I'll never forget watching some show. There was some local band playing. I don't even know what it was. And I'm the only one in the room. I mean, the show did lousy. And I'm just standing there watching the band. And apparently I was smiling and watching the band. And my bartender comes up to me, and I can see him staring at me out of the corner of my eye. And I'm like looking, I'm like, what are you looking at? And she was like, you know what? She goes, what the hell are you smiling at? And I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was just kind of like, well, I like the band, And then, I realized that, what she said to me was, she goes, I see you in here night after night with 400 people in the room. I haven't seen you smile like this in 2 years. And she walked away. That's all she said. And I didn't really think nothing of it until I went home that night. And it occurred to me that she was right. It's just, as successful as Hell was, by the time year 10 or 11 came around, I was pretty much burnt out on it. And, suddenly standing in a room with 3 people, watching this great local band play, all of a sudden, lifted my spirits so much that I realized I needed to get back in it.
Yeah. After Club Hell, what's was the next step from there? And,
so Hell, I basically had about 4 years at Hell, though. So the last 4 years at Hell, we started doing this band thing.
Yeah.
And then the third living room closed during that time. And so suddenly Club Hell actually had about a year to a year and a half where, we were the only game in town. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, the next thing we're just getting, show after show, Dinosaur Jr., High on Fire, the Street Dogs. I mean, you just name it. And bands were just piling in.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, it finally came to an end in 11. And by that time I had the bug back, right? I'm just like, There's no way I'm giving this up now. I finally got back into it. I got to figure out something to do. Yeah. So my immediate response was to go right upstairs above me. By this time, Jerky's had been sold, and PVD Social Club opened. Yeah. Which was the incarnation of Jim Vickers from Motif. He was the Motif guy. And so I was up there for, briefly, because, everybody knows, what happened, with that guy and the bars he ran. So it wasn't a good situation. And I ended up having to get out of there. Mm-hmm. And so by the stroke of luck, I happened to have a band called The Casualties at the time was really big. And I had them booked for PVD Social Club.
Yeah.
And somehow I caught wind that Lizzie Arrojo was running the Firehouse. And she was, a good friend of mine from the Lupo's days.
Okay.
And so I reached out to her. I said, Lizzie, I don't know if you got the space, but I got some shows. And she was, thrilled to have me come along. So my first show was the Casualties there. And, absolutely sold the place out beyond belief, And the only thing I was bummed out about was I couldn't get any better from there. And then any other show after that was a disappointment, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to build up to that. John.
Yeah, leave it to me to put a first show sold out. Very good. We'll see you later.
Yeah,
we don't need you anymore. But so that's kind of how the Firehouse started. And I put a few shows at the Firehouse, and then I learned all about the FET thing.
Yeah.
And Don King was still involved with that at the time. Both places actually. And Don again is a person I had known for a long time. And so one thing led to another. And, I started putting some shows in at FET too, and a few shows at Firehouse. And, eventually that went on for a couple of years. And then eventually the opportunity came up for me to take over Firehouse, which had pretty much outside of the shows I was doing in the room, they weren't really doing a lot. And
yeah, okay.
So they got this idea that, well, if you're interested in maybe running it full time, maybe you could, save it or, do something, maybe, turn it into something else.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of how that all came about. So the next thing I know, I'm managing Firehouse and putting all the shows in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then by that time, Wendy came along and we started becoming an item, and, she was dying to get involved too. So that's, we became partners in business before we became partners in life, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at first I was kind of resistant to it. I was like, I'm just got started. Let me, and then of course she wouldn't let me off the hook. So
of running Firehouse.
Yeah. I was like, all right, fine, do it. It was one of the best decisions. One of the best decisions I ever made. She's great.
Yeah.
So, so that's how, Firehouse came about. And then, I was faced with, that was the first time probably ever that I was faced with a situation where I'm staring at a 30-day calendar and I have to figure out, how to fill it.
Yeah.
Even, through all the years at the Living Room and everything else, I mean, my shows were pretty much kind of like, the whole mechanics of the outside promoter, right? Find a date that's open, rent the room, get the band, do the show. And, so Firehouse was a great opportunity for me because it was the first place that I actually got to just sit there and go, okay, I got to, put 30 dates in the calendar or close to it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's where you really learn,
Okay.
I mean, it none of it's easy, but, as a promoter doing a show once a month, it's so much different, than, when you're worrying about 25 shows and, and the economy that goes with that and how you balance it off. And, does it make sense for the venue? I mean, that's always the toughest part, especially now. I mean, as we all know, I think the music scene on a live level is, for of various different reasons, it's just not as lucrative as it once was. So kids aren't automatically just going to a show because they're 15.
Yeah, their attention seems to be in a lot of different places, or they're discovering music in different ways. Because I mean, for me growing up, it was a place called the Espresso Bar in Worcester, where it was like I was either playing a show or I was there hanging out, watching shows. But that's how I, like what you were talking about, the Civic Center experience was like, this is where people would tell me what bands to check out. And it was just the whole social network of that. And it just, it's much different these days. But yeah, I mean, with Firehouse, I mean, what comes to mind is just how much that place meant for the local Rhode Island music scene. There were just a lot of bands that were coming through there, and there were just like you were kind of even just talking about some of the opportunity that wasn't there at certain points in the Providence scene, but Firehouse was that place. Can you talk a little bit more about that, of some of the bands that were coming through and who you were working with?
Firehouse went through some really strange ups and downs,
Yeah. Okay.
For whatever the reasons are, and so every time somebody new came into the place, the personality of the room changes, right? Because everybody's got their forte and their things that they think they're good at. And by the time I took it over, like I said, it was pretty much empty. I mean, there was, a smattering of shows happening, but the heyday that it had just had before that with the Roz Raskins of the world had already kind of gone by. And they had done a bunch of stuff, and not to anybody's fault, as far as the bands go, or even the promoters that were working there. It was just, what the ownership group decided to do. It's essentially been a place where, the ownership group decides to pull a plug when they want to.
Okay.
And it just, you know what I mean? And then it just goes from there. Maybe it's financial, maybe they have different ideas of what they want to do with it. And then, the next thing they're reopening it with somebody else and hoping that for a different result. So, that's why the history of Firehouse is so erratic. And it still is, considering that it still potentially might be something down the road. But so naturally when I took it over, I pretty much brought the punk element back. The room definitely screams out, punk rock, and it was punk, it was metal, and I certainly am not a one-trick pony. I mean, we're bringing in other stuff. It's just what's interesting is a lot of times the other stuff really wasn't getting as much notice. Maybe because my finger on that community wasn't as strong as it needed to be. But my tenure there, was only about 3 years, but it seemed like, we sort of got pigeonholed into this punk metal room. But I think that was the only thing we were getting recognized for. We were doing a lot of stuff there.
Oh, okay.
We did David J there from, Bauhaus and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that was hands down one of the greatest things I ever did, I think.
Yeah.
And people came, and people recognized that it was there, but sometimes you just can't get past what, people are going to stereotype you for. But yeah, I mean, we did, at least in the punk scene, I mean, we just had anybody who was anybody played, the Firehouse in that 3 years.
That's right.
Or your big hardcore bands. But, sometimes those, sometimes, the shows that mean the most to you are the ones that, aren't necessarily the most rewarding financially. Sometimes you just do a show, and, because of the nature of the, because of the, who the person is that's getting on stage. Like, every time I do Richie Ramone, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, who's on stage playing music, especially when he's doing the songs he wrote.
Yeah.
And then you're listening to a Ramones song and you're like, shit, this is one of the Ramones, and it's, and he's such a great guy, and it's such an important piece of history. He's one of those guys, and I say this all the time to people, I would lose money on him every time. If he asked me for the next 10 years to book him once a year at a place, I'll find a place for him and book it, just because it's just more about the spirit of it.
Yeah.
And I think you still need to have that. I mean, I know there's some of my peers, will disagree with that, because let's face it is a business and everybody's trying to make money. But I don't think I've ever lost sight of the fact that deep down inside, I'm still a 16-year-old kid that heard music for the first time walking by center stage on my way to work. And I don't think I've ever lost that in some way. So sometimes, I just do stuff because I think it's important on a spiritual level,
Yeah.
And it's no different than, going back to Randy. Randy had no business at all, or no need, let's say, to, give some 19-year-old college kid a chance at a show. I mean, he didn't need to do that, and because of that, I think that's part of his legacy. I And I think that that's the kind of thing that I know, Gregory certainly tries, and, I try to pass that on. I try to pay that forward every time I do a show. If I have some kid, hits me up for a show and I can figure out a way to get him in the room, I have no idea if anybody's coming.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays, it's not as easy to, open up your room to something that might not make any money, especially when you're scraping every dollar together to try to keep it open.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we don't do that sometimes, and I'm talking about we, the people that are in charge, I think we'll, eventually, you will see this thing die, because sometimes it's got to be about, how do you keep the scene going, and it can't always be about every dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just got to be about the fact that there's a kid that's a musician, and he's dying to get his music out there to some people, and he needs a place to do it in, and you got to do it. So
yeah.
To me, that's the biggest thing Randy left me with, and it's certainly till I stop doing it, I will always try to remember that and pay that forward.
But yeah, can you talk how Askew came about, and just talk about your experience with the club there?
Yeah, well, Askew itself, the concept of it all, and that literally, kind of came out of Windsong's head. After Firehouse, I, actually was, not burnt out necessarily, or I just. I don't know if I was really that anxious and just to get right back into another project right away, because that was a lot of stuff that, again, that went on there, and it was kind of, by the time I got out of there, I was a little bit dismayed with with how things were going.
Mm-hmm.
I did move over to Alchemy. I was fortunate that my buddy Davey gave me an opportunity to put some shows there, and that's also become a very important part of, of our lives now.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great to be able to move over there immediately and, at least start getting some shows into the room. And then along the, it didn't take Windsong long. The next thing I know, she's dragging me into the Old Century Lounge and saying, "Look, babe, this is the spot," And, I have to give her a lot of credit. At the time, I was actually general managing the gym I was working at. So I was general managing a Gold's Gym.
Okay.
And, so I was like, my basic response was, "Well, babe, I'll help you. I'll put some shows in the room, and this is great, and good luck. And if you need any help, I'll give it to you. But, this is yours, so run with it,
Yeah.
And so, and she did. She got it up and running and got it started, and it just seemed to make sense that Wendy was going to need a little bit of help, and also, as usual, the Gold's Gym, which I had, worked at for over 20 years, the owner ended up getting sick unexpectedly and passing away. And so that ownership had changed. I didn't like the new ownership. And, so it just seemed like, again, the stars just aligned, and, the music gods, if you will, just keep pulling me back into this thing. So and that's kind of what happened. So finally I was like, you know what, Wendy, yeah, sure. Let me kind of jump on board with this and help you. But the creativity of it all, especially, from a non-music point of view, is, essentially all Windsong. I mean, she just has so many great ideas, and, so many different things that she does. From the comedy stuff to the book readings to just all the different things that we've done already. It gives us a lot of versatility. The room allows us to do that kind of stuff, and it's nice that we don't necessarily have to rely on music every single night to be open.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we both want it to be an important factor of the room. And I think, I think we have. I think we've done a good job in a short period of time establishing ourselves as a room that can be counted on to do some good live shows and have some good bands on stage. And we're certainly going to continue to do that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like about this room is, especially being a restaurant as well, we have a little more room for other creative marketing ideas, which we were just kind of starting on. Before this whole COVID thing hit, but, just the idea of, being able to, have downloadable music available on the tables for diners that are sitting there. And, so if you're sitting there eating one of our, meals and Eric and the Nothing comes on over the house system and you're curious as to who that is, you can flip through the those cards with the weird with the weird markings on them, and you can find the Eric and the Nothing album and you can download it, maybe
that's cool. Yeah.
Wendy's in the background going, it's a QR code.
QR codes. Yeah.
QR. I don't need to know names of them. I just know what they do, right?
Yeah.
But, yes. So, there's so many of those different things that, we were just kind of starting to get into, which, almost certainly all the house music is always, always the local artists.
Mm-hmm.
It's for whatever little bit it helps them on Spotify, at least we're playing it all the time.
Yeah.
And we're trying to, do all these other little extra things that we can do besides just putting the band on stage. Just to try to help with exposure and stuff like that. And we were just getting ready to tie in, some dinner special kind of things where, if you came in and you came for dinner and we would have like a featured local artist on, playing again. Maybe we're playing the new record.
Yeah.
And if you bought the record, you would get, 15% off your meal or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Just little weird, little cross marketing things like that just might just, get the movement going a little bit more. It's not just, the same old stuff, bands playing, you come see it, then you go home. It's, we're trying to make it so that, it's in the room all the time. People have opportunities to experience it all the time. And what's cool about that is we have a bunch of people that come in that have never seen a band in the room. They're only there to eat because they happen to work, downtown. And, they would have never seen the band or known about them if they didn't hear it on the house system, right?
I got you.
So,
yeah.
So that's awesome. It's like when I get to sell that CD to somebody that would have never known who the band was. To me, that's, you're doing your job a little bit, as somebody who's trying to work and exist within the scene itself. At least you're helping to push it along a little, even if it's just one CD that was sold. It's one more than was sold before, and it's somebody somewhere in the state now is listening to it. Yeah, that's just not part of the cool kids that come to the show, right? But, now they got the record.
I think that's great. But I mean, even with that, what comes to mind is that I know you had done some listening parties for some album releases, so like still just staying active and opening your room for that.
The listening party was something, I just took that page out of the 80s, that's what, listening parties were happening back then when I was a kid, and I was in college radio and, the record label would call me up and go, hey, Ace Frehley's putting out a record. You want to come down and have some free beers and, listen to the record and meet some people. And, there might even be some food left if you get there on time, and you would go and, again, you had an opportunity to meet other like-minded people in the scene and, you got to hear the record and, and so, when the whole COVID thing started and I realized we couldn't put anybody on stage, I was just kind of brainstorming about what to do. And I was like, I wonder if I brought these back, if it would make sense, know? And we did a bunch of them. And, we kind of pulled back on it for a little bit. But it's one of the things that we are going to bring back once we're back up and running, regardless of whether or not the band actually wants to play a show for their record release. I think the listening parties are something that we could do, on off times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could get a bunch of people to come out, get all your friends together and we'll throw some dinner special and we'll come and let everybody come around, sit and listen to the record.
Yeah.
And then why don't you get on stage and talk about the record a little bit? I mean, I feel like, that especially, I used to love listening to the band and having them tell me how they came up with different ideas. And, for a guy like me, who's not a music, I'm not a musician. I don't have that, ability, but, so it intrigues me, when, to listen to a musician, in a band, tell me how they came up with a concept and how they put it together. I mean, I find that fascinating, so.
I'm sure it still goes back to the interviews as a college radio DJ. I'm with you too. I just want to know, tell me more about this stuff.
Yeah. And I think the whole listening party thing is a lost art that, I'm going to be very adamant about, bringing back, once the time is right.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. Yeah. I think that there's, cool. I mean, keeping with what you've been up to with Askew, in the end of last year, early fall, you were doing outdoor shows. How was that for you guys? And is that something that you're going to be shooting to bring back? 2021 when it warms up a little bit.
Yeah, I think if I had to read it right, and I think I've done a pretty good job of kind of figuring out, what the government was going to decide to do from day to day. Besides some curveballs you just didn't see coming. But if I had to read it right, I'm going to guess that. We're not out of the woods yet as far as, being able to safely let people back into the bars full blast. And I don't think we'll see that through March. Mm-hmm. And I think, what they'll probably do is they'll probably wait for the weather to break and then go, okay, everybody back outside. So I think you're going to see, that happen sooner than last year. By the time everything was a reaction, right, last year. So by the time they started letting people do that, it was almost half the summer was gone. Yeah. I think this year everybody's going to be able to come right out of the gate and do it, almost as soon as the weather breaks. So I think you're going to see a pretty vibrant, music scene downtown and outside, for most of this year.
Yeah.
And I think that'll kind of hold everybody over until fall. And let's face it, hopefully by fall, we can actually go back inside and do a legitimate show without having to worry about it too much,
Mm-hmm.
Hope anyway. So, but I think the summer's going to be full of outdoor stuff and we're certainly ready to go,
Yeah.
We're ready to get it going. On a national level, I had a lot of different agents reach out to me. I got a lot of stuff plugged into the calendar for touring bands, mostly in October. It seems like that's where everybody's thinking it's gonna change a little.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting on some really exciting stuff for both rooms. I mean, Alchemy being the bigger room, we do most of our bigger shows there. So, Alchemy's got some really awesome things lined up, and we got some cool stuff at Askew as well. And we just hope our fingers are crossed that. By the time we do get back to September and October, that, hopefully we're in a different space.
Yeah.
And, we can actually do the shows. And if not, then it'll just be more of the same. I guess we'll see those shows get canceled and moved and, we'll deal with it like we have been,
Yeah. But yeah, even with what you're doing right now, recently did start up doing open mics for comedy on Tuesday nights, and Thursday nights are music.
Open mic.
Yeah, music open mic. How's that been? Or just, want to, let all the listeners know that go to Askew on Tuesdays and Thursdays and check out these open mics.
What we've been doing is slowly, as the protocols start to relax a little, we're starting to, do a few more things, as comfortably as we can for people that want to go out. And so, I think we're going to spend some time in March doing some stuff in, early April until it's time to go outside. And what we've done is pretty much just kind of looked at the stage and said, okay, how can we do this, with the sensitivity of the situation we're in and make some sense. Right. So we essentially, put some plexiglass up in front of the stage. We do two different things with the microphones. We have enough microphones where we're able to switch. Switch in and out, and then we also wipe them all down. With that super duper stuff they sell now that kills everything. And then we also have a disposable like foam cover. So it's like a double thing, right? So we put the foam cover on, somebody performs on it, we take that cover off, we toss it, we wipe down the microphone, put a new one on.
Yeah.
Right? And then, and what's happening is that, nobody's using the same microphone twice. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's worked out really well. People have felt pretty comfortable doing that. Of course, we encourage everybody to bring their own mic, which makes it that much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how we're pulling that off, and it's it's going really well. People have been happy about just being able to get up there and do stuff, and and everybody feels pretty safe about it. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
And, I think, like I said, probably in March, we're probably not going to do it, every night, but I think you are going to start seeing at least a band or two pop up on stage.
Okay.
Through March on the weekends. What we were doing in November before the pause, we had a bunch of shows, and what we were doing was we were pretty much just doing one band.
Yeah.
And if it was more than one band, it was only two.
Yeah.
And again, it's really easy for Pat to go up there and just switch everything out and put another whole new set of mics down and just have two bands play. So those were going well. We actually very quietly were doing some, I think we were allowed to have about 50 people in the room, and we were getting 50 a show, and just having some bands play. One of the last ones we did was the Quins, who were absolutely fantastic. I mean, everybody was just out of their minds, especially because they were all from Massachusetts at the time, and they weren't allowed to play anywhere. So they were super excited, and the fans were. And, that's been, if there's been anything uplifting, during this, period of time, it's just when you finally do get to do a show, everybody's just so, over the top about it, happy. You just can't help but be happy about it, So yeah, I think we're going to do a little bit of that. In fact, I think the last show we did was the McGunks. We did the McGunks with the Poor Men.
Okay.
I think the night after Thanksgiving, that was like the last show we did, and then we had to do the pause thing. So
yeah. I mean, one thing I did want to bring up as we're kind of getting towards the end is I've noticed that it seems that there's like a pretty good friendship with yourself and other bookers, Mike D, Mike Delahunty, and Gregor and stuff like that. Can you just talk about the community of, promoters in Providence?
It's funny because I was going to say that, again, I'm coming out of, I cut my teeth in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it went, just life entirely was just a different animal. And and again, because there was only a few places, to work at and to do stuff at, those places became almost like fortresses, if you will. and God forbid you went and you did something somewhere else, or I mean, that's just not what you did. You got accepted into a family, and you were loyal to that family, and you there really wasn't a lot of mixing going on back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, and especially in the nightclub world, it's even worse, right? So I mean, it was I sort of was taught that kind of growing up through it all, and over time I've had to soften that stance, and learn to adapt as life has changed and things have changed, right? So if you're going to go 30 years in this racket, the one thing that you have to learn to do is be adaptable. Even if you don't understand it, you got to figure out a way to do it, because 30 years is a long time for people and perspective, and everything changes, right? So
yeah,
I think we're in a situation now where you're 100% correct. There's a lot of bars, a lot of bars doing bands. You could open up on any given night and have 4 other shows you're competing with, and sometimes you're standing there and you're pissed off. That you're not making money, and something else down the street's doing better, and but I think the difference is that we're not as angry with each other. I think back then you would get really mad at the other guy, and I think now, now I think there's just a better understanding that we're all kind of trying to do the same thing. We all, Gregory loves what he's doing. Rick Sunderland loves what he's doing.
Yeah.
Those guys, I have conversations with those guys all the time. They sound like me talking, right? So, so I think you learn that, well, they're not really, trying to hurt me. They're just doing the same thing I love to do, Unfortunately, because of the way the scene is supported, and, and the amount of exposure there is out there and opportunities, unfortunately, we all do end up hurting each other a little bit. It's just the nature of economics. There's only so many people out there seeing a show, and there's only so many dollars to be spent, and sometimes your friends have to make hard decisions about only going to one show instead of all 3.
Yeah,
and so those things do happen, and I think you see, places like Dusk and the Parlor and Askew and and Alchemy, and we all struggle a little bit because it's not it's not a perfect world in that situation where every night we're open, and every night's making money,
Mm-hmm.
But you're 100% correct too, though. I think the gang that's, kind of the hierarchy of people that are sort of, running the things and, booking the shows. I think we just have a different perspective on it, in the sense that, it's not really meant to be a personal thing. It's just, it is. And if we can all help each other out along the way, I think we all do a good job of trying to do that.
Yeah.
I think I've had situations where those guys have stepped up and helped me with stuff just as much as I have for them. So, I think we're fortunate that we have this beautiful, little community here that, not only, supports the arts, but, kind of sort of gets along doing it.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes it hurts, it hurts to get along, sometimes, but, at least on an economic sense, so, but I think we're all in a great place. I think it, it's nicer this way than, in years past, where I, literally had, a mortal enemy that was doing stuff against me. I mean, I've certainly been through many years of that. Like I said, especially in the 80s. I mean, I could tell you that in the 80s, both on a nightclub level and a band level, there were times where I physically had to fight to, have what I had.
Really?
Oh yeah. Back then you booked the wrong show at the wrong time, and somebody else believed it was their band, and next thing you know, you might be fighting that person. That person might be coming down to your place to beat you up because how dare you stole his band.
Wow.
So I mean, I know the 80s are considered a primitive, barbaric time. How people think today, but I mean, that's the harsh reality. That's what it was like, So we have a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We have a beautiful thing in 2021. That we can all coexist in some kind of way, and hope for the best. We all hope for the best for each other. I mean, think about it. What would be really great is that music fans really rally around everyone and do everything they can to keep the scene vibrant and all the clubs, full.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, really where it comes in. It's going to depend on the new batch of kids and the new batch of young music fans, and are they really interested in going to a venue and seeing a show? you know?
Yeah.
So we shall see.
Yeah. Well, this is the call to action. If you're listening to this, go to every club
Go to the show.
as often as you can, you know? So, well, I have just one more question for you in this, segment here. John, what would you say is your greatest accomplishment, connected to the music industry?
Well, that's a good question. I just think
the answer is marrying your wife is the answer.
Yeah. Well, you heard that, did you?
Yeah. My wife. And then, all right, Yeah,
this is my struggle on a daily basis. Okay. I'm glad we're getting this on tape. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, I don't know. I think, I mean, at the risk of sounding like I'm backing out of the answer, but I just think that since I've been a college kid till now, I don't know if I ever really imagined myself doing this in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it just kind of happened so, organically, and, it just kind of, sort of just nonchalantly came along that, I don't know if I've sometimes I don't know if I've stopped to really think about it, as far as, what it is that I'm doing and what it means to people. I don't know. I feel like, I've been doing this since 1984. And,
mm-hmm.
and I think that, to me, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many people come and go. I mean, so many people come and go. And, so I just think that, my longevity in this, I think, is the thing I think I'm most proud of is,
mm-hmm.
I guess is the answer, right? I think it's not any one particular thing. I think it's the culmination of all of it, that allows me to, talk to you about this right now and still say, hey, I'm 55. I still got some gas in the tank. I'm still excited about doing it. And I'm still thrilled that, I have the opportunity to do it. And, for some reason I keep, finding the right people and coming up with the right ideas. And, in his COVID, and,
yeah,
I made a joke last year that, I've kind of gotten used to being the oldest guy in the room and having an answer for what the situation is.
Yeah.
I remember sitting around, about halfway through this thing, and I looked at everybody. I go, what's amazing about this? For once in my career, I could say, I don't have an answer. I've never seen this before. So, it's just as exciting for me, I guess, as it is for anybody else, just, being in a world of uncertainty and not really knowing what the answers are, so,
yeah.
If you multiply that over 30 years of just all these different things coming at you,
mm-hmm.
Able to adapt and overcome, I think I could say that's been my biggest thing,
Yeah.
And I think the second thing is, like I said, I think, I think none of us realize, I guess, and, how much some of this means to people, so I'm happy in a sense that, I'm able to do something that does bring joy to people in the world and helps
mm-hmm.
them in some kind of way. I think that makes me happy as well.
Yeah.
I would say those are the two big things.
Yeah. Well, John, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time to talk. It's been cool to hear your story and your connection and how deep it is with Rhode Island's music scene. So thank you, John.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, man. This is it's a fabulous thing you're doing. I've been listening to, all of them, and,
cool. Thank you.
It's a cool thing, man. I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe when things get back to normal, we can even do one from the stage.
Yeah.
Live from Askew,
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
These holes get deeper every day. So I couldn't make you myself